All right, turbines to speed. I think we are good to go here. Slightly a few seconds late, but here in the sunny Pacific Northwest, the temperature outside is roughly 7.5 billion degrees. That is imperial though, and not metric, even though I am Canadian, because my wife is American and we tend to use American temperatures so that we can understand each other. And I'm sitting here in a room in the confluence of multiple computers, so it's just slightly warmer than that 7.5 million, maybe as high as 8 million degrees. So I have a fan blowing on me to the left, and that was causing some audio problems, which I think I have managed to solve here. And looks like everything is ticking the way that we want it to be. So without further ado, let us get started and say hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here, and welcome to this live stream where we're going to see if I remember how my code works. And we are going to be continuing working on our ability to, what's this? Show pop-ups in, oh, right, I remember that now. Show pop-ups in our packages. There's actually a little bit of work I have done on this. So if I was to go to, whoops, override, oh, I should have done it that way, shouldn't I? Override report like so. Let's see what happens. There we can see that package has no dependencies. Now, a package that does have dependencies, I guess I would have to hit from a package report, wouldn't I? Because I don't have any in one of those things. So an example of a package that has dependencies is PackageDev, and if we hover, we can see that it has dependencies PyYAML, pathlib, and SublimeLib. That's one half of the information we want. Of course, we want to be able to hover over this, and instead of saying dependencies none, it would say depends on, and it would pull in the list of packages that depend on this particular package. Let's just turn that up. And if you'll recall, we were having some problems with getting that dependency information. And as you can see, I've got it working now. But let's go over all of that in just a second after I hold my left hand on the Windows key and then come over with my right pointer finger and press this key like this. I feel better now. Okay, I'm going to push it one more time. That turns it off. So the deal was this, if you will recall, this is grabbing information out of these packages. And if we were to, for example, now remember I just said if we were to look at PackageDev, it has dependencies for PyYAML, pathlib, and SublimeLib, right? Now, if I did view package file and said PackageDev, whoops, PackageDev metadata, we can see that it has this file inside of it called packagemetadata.json. This is something that package control inserts into the package when it installs a package. And essentially how this all works is there's one big JSON file that is the channel repository that's hosted by the packagecontrol.io website. It's downloaded to your system when the first time you say install package. That has all sorts of information on all of the packages, what their dependencies are, in some cases, as we'll see, what versions of Sublime they support, and all of that stuff. And one of the fields in there is where to go to download the Sublime package file, or where to get one. Most of the time, that's a GitHub repository. And when package control goes out there, it pulls down the zip file for the latest release and unpacks it and repacks it into a Sublime package file, which basically involves changing the directory structure inside because The zip file needs to have the top level parts of the package in the top level of the zip, but the zip files that fall out of, say, GitHub don't work that way. And along the way, it injects a package metadata.json like this one, which is the information for this package in this channel. And if we hit it, we'll see that it requires Sublime Text with the version greater than or equal to 3118, and it has no dependencies. And I thought that was exceptionally weird. If you remember the last stream, which was a couple of weeks ago, that was in fact the case. And we went and did some searches and found a couple of packages that have dependencies, but this isn't one of them. And it wasn't until afterwards, after the stream ended, that I realized the stupidity of what I was doing here. Now, if we did that same view package file and typed package dev and said dependencies, you see that there's this file in here called dependencies.json. And if we hit that, we see something that says this. And this is basically saying for any platform and any architecture, if this version of Sublime is greater than or equal to 3000, then these are the names of the dependencies to use for this particular package. Now, this is the information which I was expecting to see here inside this. The way that this is a list of keys, this should have been, I would have thought, this list right here. But it wasn't, and I was confused by that. And then I remembered, and I've covered this in previous streams when we were working on HyperHelp and it being a dependency. So probably if you were watching those streams, you were shouting at the screen saying, OdatNurd, why are you being such an idiot? There are two ways to add dependencies to your package. One way would be to add them here, not to this package metadata.json, but inside the actual package channel file, which you do when you add a package. And the other way is to have in your package, when you create it, a file called dependencies.json that has this information inside of it. And more often than not, you'll find that this, for all recenty type packages, and I'm making finger quotes when I say recent, and this is only a guess on my part, but I'm saying in the last few years, the packages that require dependencies probably do it this way rather than adding it to the channel. And there's a very specific reason for that. And that is, in order to get your package into the channel, you have to, and we're planning on doing a video on this on the other channel, you need to clone the repository on GitHub for the package control channel. You need to add the appropriate this information in the appropriate location, in the appropriate place, run tests to verify that you've done that correctly and that your package is structured properly. There's some code analysis that goes on that's automated. And then you create a pull request, and the community, there's a few staunch volunteers who volunteer their free time to do this, which is why you should never ever complain to them that it's taking a long time for this to happen, because if they didn't volunteer, would take even longer. They need to do their own sanity checks to make sure that the package looks okay. It's not a duplicate of another package. The name isn't going to cause problems. Then they close the CR and merge it. And only once that happens does package control see your package and allow other people to see it. But if you're the one developing your package and your package requires dependencies, you need to be able to install dependencies in your copy of Sublime so you can develop the thing. So that's where the dependencies.json file comes in. Well, most packages would have this dependencies.json to provide this information. Only in the rare case that, say, if you were working on a package that required these three dependencies yourself, but at the same time you also have package dev installed, for example, as long as you have package dev installed, these dependencies are going to be installed. So you wouldn't have to create your dependencies.json. You could just say in dependencies, I have these three, and you would just make this list right here be where this empty list is. And then this would get added to the control file in the channel, and your development would proceed apace, and it wouldn't matter that this isn't going to be available to tell anything how to install dependencies until after the package is successfully added to package control. So there's actually two things that have to happen here, and that is what we have going on here, and which is why when I hover over package dev, excuse me, it knows that information because it's actually loading this. Now, I have code for that. I have a lot of stuff that's open here. I don't know. Oh, I know why that's broken, but we'll just go ahead and. Is this my actual one? Then I should probably fix it, huh? I'm not sure what happened there. Delete that one. Close that. We don't need that help for just a second. That's just some code and override audit, and so was that, and so was that. A couple of reports, and yes, I added this bit of code to this and some other code in here. So let's go ahead and go over how all of this works. So, and this is code that more or less works. It needs to be maybe cleaned up a little bit in the purpose of the stream tonight, which is one of those ones that may not go the full 2 hours depending on how things ultimately go. Not because we don't have enough stuff to do, but because it is very, very warm in here, and I've spent the whole day working in here. So unless there's a really compelling problem, there's the chance that we might go a little short and only go about an hour or an hour and a bit on the stream, not counting all of this introduction part at the beginning, to give myself a little bit of a respite from the heat and go hang out in other parts of the house that are cooler. When you create a I think as we developed this in the original code, there was this metadata here was calling self load metadata right away when this was created. That's not how it works any longer. We have something here called load metadata. Okay, now when this is called, it tries to load one of two different types of files. This is sort of a more cleaned up version of code that we did in the other stream. So the default is the package metadata, which is this one, unless this package is a dependency, in which case it should look for dependency metadata.json instead. And if we wanted to just go over here, meta, we can see there's like a few of those. Now these are things that appear in actual dependencies themselves, and they provide information on the dependency. So it has the version and the version of Sublime Text and the description and all that other stuff. Sort of the same layout as this. You'll see there's Sublime Text dependencies version. The keys aren't in the same order, but that's not really guaranteed in JSON. That's no big deal. So it's either that one, or if it's a that package is a dependency, then that one. Then we know that file has to exist in the top level of the package, so we construct a resource name or a package prefix that is the text packages and the name of this package, and look to find the first resource that starts with that, the first resource of this or this that starts with that text, which means it's in our package. And if there isn't any, it returns. Otherwise, we load the package resource using Sublime's API, then we decode it into JSON. And if this isn't a dependency, then we also do extra work, because if this is a dependency can't depend on other things. There's not a dependencies key here in this thing, because that's not how this rolls. But if it's not a dependency, then we say that the dependencies metadata is gathered by calling get dependencies, which is this one. Now here, this is the new code. We do the same thing as below, come up with a prefix that's the text packages and the name of a package, and look for dependencies.json, i.e. this one that is inside of that package. And if we don't find one, then we just return whatever the current metadata has in that key and default it to an empty. So in the case of, say, this one, the dependencies key is empty, so this would return metadata.getDependencies, which is the empty thing. If for some reason this was in an invalid file, which I believe would only happen if someone put one of these in here and modified it, because package control is not going to do it, it injects the empty list so that our code doesn't break. Otherwise, it loads that dependencies.json and calls self dependencies to get the appropriate list of dependencies. And if that fails, it just does the same thing it did up there. So basically, if there isn't a dependencies.json, or there is but it can't be loaded, or there is but it can't be decoded, or there's a problem figuring out what dependencies it contains, just assume the default dependencies from the channel or the empty list if there isn't one. And then up in here in select dependencies, this is actually code that's taken from package control. It has been slightly modified because package control needs to be able to look at this and know that this is the case. Now, there's several different things that can be happening here. This could be Linux, it could be Windows, it could be OS X. There could be multiples in the list. There can be an x64. There can be, or sorry, there, as we can see over here, we can even look. There could be a Windows OS X or Linux. There can also be a Windows OS X or Linux with an architecture on the end like x86 or x86_64, those sorts of things. Basically, if we did sublime.arch like so, this is x64 because this is a 64-bit machine. And it can also be star. So that just says star is the generic fallback for anything. So in the specific case that the dependencies are different depending on whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, or the dependencies are different depending on whether or not you're on 32-bit or 64-bit, and some combination thereof, this has to be able to look at them and get the correct ones. And it also has to be able to, based on this, also have this, because sometimes, like this says, for any platform, as long as the Sublime build is 3000 or higher, it's these dependencies. There are some, the ones for package control, for example, have dependencies on some libraries, but only if the build of Sublime Text is less than a certain value, because after that point, they were dependencies that didn't need to be externally loaded because they were provided by Sublime. So, or the code was changed and stuff like that. So there's different ways for that to go, and we need to be able to look at any arbitrary list of platforms and any arbitrary list of builds and come up with the right one. And this is code that package control uses to do that, and I took it and made some modifications to it. And so our code works the same as package control does. So there's a list of selectors which starts first for the current platform and its architecture, then just for the current platform, and then the fallback of everything in that order. And we iterate over all of them. And if it's not in the list, we skip and continue. So if there is, in this case, a Linux x64, that one will be used. If there isn't, but there is a Linux, then that one will be used. And if there isn't, then star will be used. And if there isn't a star, then nothing happens. But I would imagine that your dependencies.json file is terribly broken in that case. And then we grab the information out of here and do this bit here, where now we have the contents of the correct selector, which in this case is star, which is this dictionary. The keys in here look like this. It can say greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or something like 3000-3018. So only builds 3000 to 3018. So this thing gets those keys, as we can see there, sorts them reverse for a very specific reason, so that you get the greater thans, then the less thans, then the star, well, which you could put in here as well. I just forgot to mention it, which just means doesn't matter what version of Sublime, just use this. and then it would call is compatible version, which is up here, also taken from package control, as we can see here. And it uses regular expressions to match greater thans, less thans, greater than, less than, or ranges. And depending on which one of these regular expressions matches, we use that to get the versions and compare to see if it's better than the min and max that are specified, the version of Sublime that's currently in. That's all the, excuse me, all the changes that we made to this. And um, I guess there was also one which I may have checked in, I may not have done, if we actually looked for load metadata. It happens in a couple of places. First, when you initialize a package list and you tell it it needs to scan, for in this case, sorry, it's finding either all of the packages in a particular list or just all packages if the list isn't anything. After it's done finding all of the packages as appropriate, filtering for name list, it goes back over them and calls their load metadata so that the metadata for all packages can be pulled in. And then there's one more that happens in scan, which is actually in the package info class itself. And it gets invoked if you create an instance and scan is true. So if you said, new or package info for default and scan is true, then after it gets to there, it runs a self scan, and self scan does a scan for all of this particular package to see where it all exists, and then it calls load metadata. So that's how this all works, and it seems to work quite well, as we saw. Submerge has no dependencies. Terminus has Pyte process, Pyte, and WC width, and of course we know package dev has some. I don't think package resource viewer does. Package control itself doesn't. It does in some builds of Sublime, but not all of them, if I remember correctly. In fact, we can even check into that. That's not this one, is it? Yeah. If we looked for package metadata, whoops, sorry, I got to choose view package file, don't I? Package metadata for package control. Oh, sorry, I guess it's a dependencies. See, here's an example of package metadata that doesn't have a dependencies key. So it's good that I put in that guard code that knows to return the empty list if there isn't one already in there. BPF dependencies package control, like so. Here we go. See, if you're on Windows, it only has dependencies for builds of Sublime that are particularly early. So on Windows, it only needs dependencies if you're using Sublime Text 2. On Linux, it only needs stuff around about build 3109, which is a few years old. After that, those weren't needed anymore. And for all other platforms, it only needs BZ2 to be able to unarchive things for all older versions of Sublime as well. Otherwise, that list has nothing in it, which is why it has nothing in it right now. So this all works great, and I was ready to continue on with stuff. We can close all of this stuff for now because it's not as interesting. And because the plan is to just try to inject all of the data in here in the way we want it to be in there, whether it's formatted correctly or has the correct font size or is hidden or not, and all of that stuff. And then we can go back and twiddle around the HTML for it to make it look the way that we want it to. And I was getting ready to do that, and I had this terrible, terrible realization that I was doing something horribly wrong. And I was, and there's a comment that is actually in here. And I think if we search around for it, we might even see, oh, I think it was up there. I guess it was in the, all of the code below is predicated on being able to load a resource file from disk using the Sublime API, which is not something that we want. I went to great pains to get this stuff to work because, and it works like this. We are using, for example, sublime.loadResource. So you give it a resource name, right? So if you said sublime.loadResource from, and the resource name is packages user preferences sublime settings, like so, the result is it loads the settings file from my user package and returns it as a string. And I could say that, right? And then I could say Sublime, as we see up in other code, and it's not necessarily in this one, decode value decodes a JSON string, and if you pass it the string, you get a JSON object, or in our case, a Python object. So this is how we're using, how we're loading that dependency.json file and stuff. And there's actually this isn't a good idea for a thing to do. We're gonna break some stuff pretty hardcore here. But let's note, if I hover over package dev, it knows that the dependencies are PyYAML, pathlib, and sublimelib, and it's version 3.2.9, and it has a description and all of that stuff, right? And then I say disable package. I always want to say ignore package. Package dev, like so. Okay, now package dev successfully added to the list of packages. So if I hit this key, we'll see that in the list, package dev now has those brackets around it because it's a disabled package. We still know that it's an installed package. If I hover the mouse over it, it's an unknown version. It's currently disabled. There's no description. There's no dependencies, but it still knows that other information that it had previously. And if there was a override in there, we would be able to still see it in this list over here and see that same information. Now, why is that the case? Because when you ignore a package, Sublime.findResource can't find the resources in that package because it's ignored, and Sublime.loadResources can't load the resources from that package because it's ignored. And as a result of that, by disabling package dev, we no longer can figure out what version of the package is actually installed, what dependencies it actually requires and stuff. We would actually need to enable package dev, and then refresh. And I have some overrides I was using for testing. Those are all fine. If I redo that, then that information comes back. So the whole point of this stream is that this code can't use sublime.loadResource. It can use sublime.decodeValue, because whether the sublime.decodeValue doesn't care where the JSON string object thing came from. It just knows how to decode it. It's just load resource and also find resource will not work. Now, we'll notice here, if we call get packaged package file contents, we actually open the package file as a zip file, find the appropriate entry, encode it for reading as UTF-8, grab either the data as lines or as one whole big blob of data, and then return the content back. And if you called get unpacked override contents, then it creates a file name that's the unpacked path of the folder and the name of the override, joins them together. Whoops. It loads the data up, reads it as lines, and returns it back. Neither of those two things is using the API, and that means that we are basically, this package class is smart enough to look inside the zip files to find the contents, look in the folder itself manually to find the overrides, compare them, or the package contents there, compare them to determine what's an override, what's just a file that's in the folder that doesn't correspond to something that's in the package, and all of that stuff. And this has to do the same. If this worked that way, then hovering over package dev when it was disabled would still be able to load that information. So we really need to extend this class somewhat. And I'm going to zoom this because it's going to be the one I think we're going to be working on the most. I need to drink some water here, so pardon me. That's better. I was very tempted to make some coffee, even though it's a hot day, but now I'm envisioning a slightly better API on this. Everything that's double underscored is, of course, private to this class, and anything that's single underscore is something that's just, you know, I know I call it unofficially private. It's not something. It's an indication to me that it could be called externally. You just don't want to by default. So here's the public API. See if this package exists by checking to see if it has a path for a shipped package or an installed package or a place where unpacked folders could exist. Package file is either the installed package if it exists or the shipped package if it's not. That ordering is very specific because we know from looking at this, if there's a zip file or a Sublime package file named after a shipped package that's also in the installed package, Sublime actually uses the installed package version in deference to the shipped version. So you could use this to completely override an entire shipped package as a whole, which is how you would remove packages or remove resources from a Sublime package file that ships with Sublime. For example, if you didn't want the Python snippets, the only way to for sure remove them other than creating empty snippet files as overrides would be to copy the python.sublime package file, put it in your installed packages folder, and manually delete the contents out of it. That's known as a complete override. It's not particularly common, but it is possible. So that's why those are ordered the way they are. And there's various other code in here that uses that package in deference to that one where possible. The package modification time is either the modification time of the installed package if it's installed, otherwise it's the shipped modification time. Both of these can exist at the same time, right? Like for Erlang, there's an installed path and a shipped path. There's also a version of when the installed package was last modified and when the shipped package was last modified, which is why it can tell that Erlang is expired because the timestamp on the one in the installed packages folder is older than the one in the shipped packages. Shipped packages is newer. That means that in theory, although not in this case because I contrived this example, the shipped version of the package is newer and we're theoretically missing out on it because we're overriding it. So it's telling us that it's expired. You can see if a package is unpacked or not by seeing if it has a path. You can get the contents of a package, which returns a list of all of the files. Those are things we're going to look at in a minute. Just the contents of the package file, the shipped contents, the installed. Sorry, this one gets you either, as we see up here, the installed package or the shipped path package, depending. Unpacked always gets you the contents of an unpacked package. That's the contents of the folder in the packages folder. This one and this one together are used to do things like come up with the list of overrides because whatever package Sublime is using, that's the one that's the base for that the overrides are applied to. But you can also get the shipped contents and the installed contents distinctly yourself. So in the case of a complete override, if we wanted to, we could see what was different between them, although nothing does that yet. How do we test if it's possible for something to have an override? That's simple. It has to have if it's a simple override, which is most overrides, that's just like this, like there's some package file or maybe more than one, like this one. There's two Sublime package files here. If you were looking for just simple overrides, then there has to be a package file and the package has to be unpacked. Otherwise, it's not possible for it to have overrides. If we're not looking for just possible overrides, then it's looking for complete overrides, in which case it has to have an installed package and a shipped package. And here's where we gather override file zip info, which given the name of an override returns the structure from the appropriate package where uh, it can actually get the content for that file. Sorry, for the zip info is the entry in the Sublime package file for the thing. Now, this is sort of an important thing because zip files are case sensitive and Linux is case sensitive, but Windows isn't and Mac OS normally isn't. It can be made to be case sensitive for file systems, but Apple doesn't really recommend it because of various when you're on an operating system where it's possible for case sensitivity to be turned off and it's turned off by default, you don't want to turn it on unless you very much know what you're doing because there's just going to be so much stuff out there that assumes it doesn't need to care about case. And this is the reason why in the early days of porting games to Linux, there were real issues with, like, oh, what game am I thinking of here? By Double Fine, Psychonauts is an example of this. And I don't know if this probably not still the case, but way back in the day, you could buy as there was part of like a bundle, I think, where you got Psychonauts and you got the experimental Linux version, and it more or less required you to take all of the data from a Windows install and dump it into your folder, and then you had to go and find all sorts of resources and change the names of them because in the code the names were a certain case, but on the file system the names were a different case, and that works just fine on Windows, works like but on Linux, and that was a big problem for a long time. But I super digress because I'm really not sure I remember enough about this code to do this well. But this override file zip info thing, um, uses get Sublime package zip info. It does it in a way that's a dictionary that's done so that we can determine uh, the appropriate entry, even if the case of the file name isn't quite correct. Here's a list of override files. This is cached. It just, it grabs the list of, so we can see here the installed components, the packaged contents and the unpacked contents as sets and then combines them together for not simple, for complex overrides. It uses those two, but those aren't visualized in reports. Unknown zip files are, unknown override files are files like all of these. They appear in the package folder, but they don't appear in the Sublime package file. So maybe you meant to add them, and maybe you didn't. That's something we added in a stream. Expired override files requires it to gather the list of overrides and then very carefully test the last modification time of each file in the file system against the timestamp of the package that's providing the thing. And then that's how we know, for example, that this readme.markdown file in the test package is expired because the Sublime package file is newer than this file, suggesting that this package was upgraded somehow since this was done, and this file may, as a result, be have changes that you need to investigate. Whoops, oh, that was an unfortunate turn of events. Ah, package info, that's all that stuff. Then that was the expired. Packed override contents. Given the name of an override file, return back a tuple that indicates if the source package is shipped or installed and the contents of the base file. This was used for the reverts. Unpacked override contents is the sort of the same. Now, set binary pattern. This is used by the bulk diff functionality. I guess I'd have to do this. If I did sort of say a bulk diff on this bad boy, those ones can't. I guess that's not a particularly good example of that. I can't remember of one off the top of my head, but basically there might be some package resources that are different, like say images that it should know not to diff. It needs to be able to determine that. You can set this. The default is the user setting for binary file patterns, but you can also set it in your Sublime Text, sorry, in your override audit settings to alter it. This calculates a diff, and this is that status thing we generated, and oh, that needs to be fixed as well. Okay, so there's that. Now, I'm thinking there's a couple of things we need here. This has possible overrides. This is override file zip info. Okay, hang on. So the list of files that are overrides, the list of files that are in the unpacked folder that aren't overrides. And okay, that's not the one. Expired ones, no. We want something like this: packed override contents, unpacked override contents. You call this one when you know there's definitely an override and you want to get the version from the zip file, so it calls get packed package file contents for the override file, thusly, and returns it back. And unpacked uses the unpacked override contents. This one gets the data from a Sublime package file as a zip file, and this one uses a file system call. We can go ahead and do this. We're on line, what, 738? Yeah, see, this is the os path.join. Tries to open the file and return it back as lines. I already forgot where we were, but I guess I could use this thing, right? Somewhere around there. So there's a couple of different things we want here. Contains file resource. And this would be checks to see if the resource provided exists in this package or not, and returns a value as appropriate. This will check the package file being used for this packet. Okay, let's say it this way. This will check both inside of package files as well as on the local file system. The return value only tells you that this resource exists in the package, not where it is represented, where it comes from, let's say. Okay, that's one. And then we want def get, what would we call this? Unpacked override content, get, yeah, we'll call it get file, self resource. Return none explicitly on that one and say, given resource specification, get the contents of that resource and return it returns none if the resource is not found. This, okay, resource loaded is the one that sublime.load resource would load. Okay, and because there is a sublime.load resource, there's also, as we see, remember if I did that, X is a string, you can also say load binary resource as well. And in that case, X is, oh, we got to scroll up here to see it, but it's a byte array. Whoops. Def get binary file self resource. Oops. This works as get file does, but the returned value is a byte array instead of a string. Thus, it works like sublime.load binary resource. As in get file, this returns the resource that API method would load. Okay, we format those. Now, writing the comments in here helps to focus us on what it is this is actually needing to do. Okay, now if we reload that, that's looking okay. Now what I'm actually going to do here is open the console in a window and just shoot that over to this, whoops, other screen over here. So I can have the console just sort of always open, if you will, like so. And we will verify that that's actually doing something one more time. Okay. And if I notice something in there, I'll try to remember to open this console, but that allows me to see this and still verify that things are loading the way I expect them to. It's a little trick I use. I haven't done that in a little bit of a while here. So if we look at get package, I'm gonna make a note of 749 over here because that's the file we're gonna want to jump back to. If we look for get packed package file contents, this is kind of doing what we want. Cannot find. So we might want to abstract. We don't necessarily want to load it in this one, right? We actually maybe want find zip entry. Where did I define that? That's here. Implement zip file get info as case insensitive for systems with a case insensitive file system. So looking up overrides will work the same as it does in the core. This may raise an exception, right. But I think that's probably, where's this? Oh, we just ignore the error in that case, huh? The other reference is lower down in the file, like that. I think it would be, yeah, cannot find file. We very much don't care about that. So let's just copy this whole shebang. We only need these ones. We don't need Unicode decode because we're not going to try and do anything. And again, we're going to jump to 749 like so. So try this with the package file for this. We don't need any of this. We just need that. Okay, can't find the file in the package. So yeah, let's leave both of those. So key error is what I believe these would be raised for that one. We don't need to say that. We just need to say return false in this case, right? And here, I guess maybe we might say return true. Well, no, that's not really going to do what we want, is it? Because it needs to check this first. Maybe we'll just pass here. We don't need to store the value. We just call find zip entry. And if that works, we can just say return true right away. Right? So create a zip file for whatever package this package is using and find the zip entry for, the resource that we're interested in, which always has to be in the resource spec, which, as we've talked about in previous streams, has to be the / POSIX Linux type thing. So it's wrong, quote unquote, on Windows. That's just the way it works. So if that works, return true. If it returned those errors there, and let's just double check this bad boy. I'm going to jump back up there for just a second. key error. Key error would be it doesn't exist. So yeah, we probably only need one of those. So let's go ahead and jump back to 749, like so. If that raises a key error, then just pass through. Now, if we look at this one, I imagine this is, well, it's trying to open the file. That's probably is not as cool as it needs to be, but we probably want something like this. And jump to 749. Now, okay. Try this. The name of the file that we want is the unpacked path for this folder, and not the override file, but the resource. And I think we want something like that. That opened up in a window over here and says returns true if path refers to an existing path, or an open file descriptor returns false for broken symbolic links. On some platforms, this function may return false if permission is not granted to execute stat, even if the path physically exists. Good enough for us. Changed in version 3.3, the path can now be an integer. True is returned if it's an open file descriptor, false otherwise. Okay, yeah. So let's just say that. I'm not sure if that can even raise an exception, to be perfectly honest. Slash some home bogus path. No, okay, good enough. So maybe we'll just do this. Return os.path.exists name. Reload that. That seems to work. Now, could we actually do something like this? Yeah, that's not too shabby. Actually, I guess I could maybe, now, what are the possible ways this could go? If this doesn't have a key, it'll throw a key error. If it does have the key, it'll return true, and that's fine. If it doesn't have the key, then it'll throw a key error. So what if we did this? Will this do what we want? So if there was a zip file and it had the resource, then it would hit this and it wouldn't throw an exception, and it could return true. What does this actually return? Maybe we might want to, I guess it's inherently maybe returns none. Yeah, G749. Oh, I like it better if we were to say something like if find zip entry resource is not none, return true. Like so. That still works, right? So if there was a zip file and the the file did exist, it would return true right away. We might even throw in a print. File exists inside a Sublime package. Print checking a local path, just so we know how that be go. And we will even say here print contains %s, and that would be self.name and a resource, like so. How's that looking? Okay, so if there was a package file, now shoot, there's another way this might fail, so let's just double check that. With with zip file that. If there was a zip and the entry was found in it, then it would return true. If there was a zip and there wasn't an entry in it, it wouldn't actually return none. It would actually throw an error, which would come down to here where we would check a local path and just check to see. This could actually fail in another way. Oh, sorry. That's a different thing. It's entirely possible for there not to be a package. I'll just import zip file. Oh, I get you. I see what I did there. Yeah, it's looks like that. Zip file dot zip file home. Nope. That returns the file not found error. All right, so okay, then I guess we did want that. I see why I did that now. Thus, okay, so if there isn't a zip file, when you call this, it immediately throws that exception where we check a local path and return true or false. If there is a zip file, but the zip entry doesn't exist in it, then it will throw an exception, although this doesn't seem to show that, and come down here. And if the entry does exist, it's there. I think that might actually sort of do what we want. So if I was to say from override audit.lib.packages import package info. Is that the correct thing? No. Whoops. How did I do that? Wiggy! Okay, and then I said package equals package info for, let's say, the user package. Okay, that does some stuff, right? Now, given that, if I said package.contains file nope.txt, gee, that did not do what I was expecting. Line 759, in contains file. Shouldn't that have returned an error? Okay, and we're going to do this a different way. We're going to do this. So if self.package file is not none, then do that. Okay, so now I need to do that again, and it doesn't contain nope.txt. It's because it said it was checking a local path. Oh, actually, I probably should have said this. Print checking inside a package file, just for our own testing purposes. So do that again, and then package contains nope. It says it's checking a local path. It's not checking the actual file. If I said preferences.sublime settings, it should say true. What else could I try here? User macros comment line. How about that? Whoops. Macros comment line. Just because it's got path. It can checking a local path, it totally exists. Great. Now we're going to come over here and say default. Now, does default contain nope.txt? It checked inside a package file. It checked a local path. It still said no. I probably should have used test package for this now that I think about it, because that allows us to look at this and say, okay, if I do that, then package file contains this. It checks inside the package. It checks the local folder. It's not there. If I check for main.sublime menu, it checks inside the package file and it exists inside the package. So yes, it totally exists. Again, if I did the same thing with readme.md like so, it still exists inside the package. And if I said .git/config, it tests inside the package file. It's not there. It checks the local path and returns true. So that, I believe, does exactly what we want it to do. So let us remove that and that and that and that. So that is good. Reload that one. Now, let us just go and jump to, oh, it's actually code in this file. All right, well, this one, yeah, not that one, but this. Resource is equal to, in this case, dependencies. Oh, I guess we can't do this till we do the other part. Oh. Basically, I guess what we want here is if self dot, if not self dot contains file res name return. Okay, that changes this. Because this is trying to find the actual resource. We're going to leave this code in. We can take this part out if we still want this to temporarily work. The whole point of this code was finding the actual resource. And as a matter of fact, we could actually even modify this to be less like this and be res name like so. And we don't need, well, actually, I guess this would be resource is equal to that instead of this. So that would still do what we want. The resource name for loading the metadata is either package metadata, but if it's a dependency, it's dependency metadata instead. And if this package does not contain this file, return, there's no metadata to load, in which case nothing happens. Otherwise, the resource that we want is packages slash the name of the package slash the resource name, which is that one. And we're still using Sublime load resource and Sublime decode value to do all of this stuff. So if we reload that, we still should be able to hover over this and see no information there and here. And we can see the version and that and that. And if we came over here to package dev, which actually has dependencies coming from the other location, that part still does what we want for that. So that part's good. And okay, then we also have get dependencies, which does the same sort of wiggy stuff here. We might say that the resource is equal to packages slash %s slash %s, and this is going to be the name and the text dependencies.json like so. And then we could say if not self dot contains file, man, I'm having a hard time, resource, then return that. We don't need this to figure out what the actual full resource name is. Oh, did I break that? Sorry, yeah, I should have done that the other way. If not self.contains file dependencies.json, then return that. Otherwise, that's the full resource. Try to load it, try to decode it, do stuff with it. Okay. That still reloads, and we're still getting the result we expect there. We're still getting version information there. Package dev is still returning stuff the way we expect. Okay, so that one actually works. If we jump down to 749, contains file, does what we want, and we've modified the code to use it. Now for this get file and get binary file, it's more or less going to be the same thing both ways, but the change is going to be in how we read and return it, whether we decode it or read it as binary. So I think we only actually want one thing for this. Def get file internal self resource as binary equals true, let's say, and we will return none. Then we can say this is return self.get file internal for the resource we were given as binary equals false instead of return none, and copy that and paste it here, and here as binary would be true. So theoretically, those ones are both implemented now. They're just implemented in turn of this. Get a file, either get file contents either from the packed package that Sublime would use or the local folder, and return it as either a string or byte array. This is the analog of the Sublime.load resource and Sublime.load binary resource API methods implemented here in a way that doesn't utilize the Sublime file catalog so that it works with ignored packages. Okay, and then because we don't like to do that, source API call and its binary cousin. Yeah, maybe that looks a little nicer for wrapping purposes. Yes, that's right. Sometimes my documentation is predicated on dumb stuff. Okay, and we can jank that code out of there. That's unpacked override contents. That's packed override contents. So we're probably going to want this to exist up here under these. Get packed contents, get unpacked override contents. Realistically, these could maybe be implemented based on this, but that is a project for another day. Okay, so what would we do here? I think what we would do is mute the microphone temporarily and drink some water. Okay. It's a complicated water bottle. It's a thermo flask. We got it from Costco, so you know it's roughly the size of my desktop speaker, holds a ridiculous amount of water, although it is half full of ice. And it's one of those ones that's all spill proof, so it involves twisting a magic cap off of a pour spout. It's a whole thing. We want to implement both of these. We may need to investigate the API methods required for this, because we either want an IO wrapper or we don't, right? To just return the data back. But what we do depends on whether or not it's a packed file or not. Let's load this first. This doesn't have quite all of these stuff in here. Well, it has more stuff than we technically need. So this would be resource. Okay. So find the zip entry for that now. What does zip file.open return? Maybe I'll go ahead and jump this over to this window so we can all see. Extract a member from the archive as a file-like object. Name is the name of the file in the archive or the zip info. The mode parameter, if included, must be R, U, or RU. Choosing U or RU will enable universal new line support in the read-only object. Calling open will raise an error. Open, read, and extract methods. I don't want to do that. I want to read from it. Return the bytes of the file name. Oh. I guess if I was to presume, I actually want universal new lines. I'm not entirely sure what that even means. The following are recognized as ending a line. End of line. Well, I thought I needed it before, so I probably had a good reason for it. If as binary file equals, oh, hang on. File equals z file dot open info mode equals ru, like so. If as binary, then file equals codex dot encoded file UTF-8. And then we would return file.read because we want to just get all of the data. We don't care about all of the stuff this was doing, figuring out which of the locations it came from. We don't care. We're not going to return that one. We're going to leave. This one we're going to pass because if the file doesn't exist in the zip file, that's no big deal for us. So we're going to pass that. But if there was a problem decoding it in the codex encoded file thing, then we want that to be a problem. We don't want that to, or we want that to be logged so someone that doesn't get their content knows why they didn't get it. Okay, now failing that, if someone called get unpacked override contents, we might do some of this action. Okay, so then we paste this. Now this is definitely one of those things where we're going to try and clean this up nicely after we're done. Okay, so that's the, this needs to be, whoop, one too far. Resource, like so. How do you open a file as binary, huh? I assume you need to pass an RB. Da, da, da. This one. Opens a file, returns a file object. OS error. File is either a string or bytes. Given the path name. Means reading in text mode. W for writing. X for exclusive. A for appending. Here we go. B binary mode. For binary read write. So that's RB. R plus B. Open for reading. Oh, you need to include. I don't want it for, oh, I see. Open the file without truncation. Yeah. Just RB. Files open in binary mode, including B in the mode argument, returns contents as bytes objects without any decoding. In text mode, okay, so that is what we want. Okay, so mode equals RB if as binary else R, and then this would be mode. What happens if you pass an encoding but you told it to be binary? No. Binary files are buffered in fixed chunks. Encoding is the name of the encoding used to decode or encode the file. This should only be used in text mode. No. Crap. What's the default? Anything? Encoding equals none. Okay. Encoding equals none if as binary else UTF-8. Okay. So it would look something like that, and return handle.read. File not found error, we don't care, we just return none. Unicode decode error, we do care about that. So, well, maybe we leave that in there for now. Just return none in that case, return none in that case. Permission error. Permission denied, unknown error. Yeah, we don't care about those ones. So we can just go ahead and do that, I suppose. The thought occurs, do we, yeah, well, we're writing this for the use in the pop-up code, but you might want it for stuff other than that, so it should have errors in it. Okay, so that's, I mean, you know how she goes. If it was trying to load something from a zip file, so we might say, oh, right, we need to say if self.package file is not none, then do that. So it doesn't get angry. And let's say print trying to, oh, sorry, we want to and we like to test these things. self.name resource as binary. Okay. Thus, trying to load from Sublime package. So if there is a package file, try to do that. Get the zip entry, open the file. If we want it to be binary, if not as binary, then say we want it to be decoded and return the value red. If there was an error, including the file not being found, or there's a key error, then pass on through. But if there was a decode error, there's an error. And then we find this. We might say mode, comma, encoding equals read binary, use none if as binary, else are UTF-8. Just to make that a little nicer. I believe that would probably do something similar to that. Okay, that does, it seems to like that. Okay, then we can open the file with the given mode and the given encoding and return it. So let's say try print trying to load from local file. And if there's a Unicode, if there's a file not found error, return none. We're gonna skip that one out. We're just gonna say if there's a Unicode decode error, say that when we try to load the file content. Otherwise, just say that there was an error loading and it falls through to return none, which would happen if the file did not exist. Okay, so based on that, let's see what we can pull off here. So we're going to do, again, test package. Now, we're going to say package.getFile. And what's this thing? What was that thing called? Let's say, whoops. readme.md as binary equals true. So this is loading from a local file as binary. Oh, sorry. I forgot how I even did that. Get binary file. It has a B in front of it, so it's totally a bytes object, as one might presume. I said byte array. Are these things? Return a new array of bytes. The byte array type is a mutable sequence. It has the yeah. We'll leave it like that for the time being. Like maybe that's what the other one returned, so that's why we might want to return that there. So that definitely returned bytes, but it turns out we can just read them. And if we said get file, get file still does that. So that may be doing something untoward. So let us say that's this one. Local file and that, and then we go like so. Okay, so pull that in. We ask for it as a regular file. It's loading it. Oh, crap. This needs to be in the other order. Okay, that might be part of my problem. Well, crap on a cracker. Okay. That is going to change this a little bit. So we're going to try that. We need to do this. The name of the file is that. That's that. Oh, yeah, okay. I guess we need to put that there. Trying to load from local file mode encoding. Try to open it, return it. If there was a Unicode error, then the file opened, but it couldn't be decoded, definitely return none. For any other error, oh crap. We want to, oh, okay. We want, if there was a Unicode decode error, do that, right? Because that means the file did exist. If we accept it on a permission error, then we would, I didn't care about permission being denied, did I? Probably should. So let's go ahead and do that. Return none. And yeah, the irony of how that seems to be repeating code is not lost upon me. We can go back and fix that later. We've actually this is an interesting enough problem. It's made me not realize how sweaty I am. So try to load it first on the unpacked folder because that file would take precedence over the other one. That totally makes sense. Mode encoding, good. Try to open it. If it works, return. If there was a problem returning the file because the permission is denied, then permission is denied. If there was a Unicode error, that's there. If there was any other error, which in this case would be a file not found error, we would just pass. You might even say file not found error like that. And now we're trying to load it from a Sublime package file, but only if we can. So if there's an error there, then we can say return none there because the package file wasn't found. And if there was a Unicode decode error, it returns none as well. But otherwise, it will have already returned a value. Okay, so let's give that a try, shall we? So this is loading a file as text from a local file. It's returning it as read in UTF-8, and I get a string. And if I say get binary file, I get the mode of RB. There's no encoding, and it's loaded as bytes. So that is a thing that works. If I said I wanted main.sublime menu, it should work the same because that is in the local packages folder, clearly because it's an override. So that is returning a byte array because it said that. But if it was get file, then it would return it as a string now. Anything else in this package that's not currently overridden? No. So I guess what we need to do is this. Delete override main.sublime menu. Okay. Uh-oh. What the hell happened here? In threads, in override report. Unsupported. Uh-oh. Does it do that every time? I think I found a bug, guys. Well, we broke it good now. That stuff we were just doing, as a matter of fact. So, well, I mean, that part loads, right? So if we said get main.sublime menu, it's trying to load from a local file. It didn't work. Trying to load from a Sublime package. And even though it's not binary, it came out as binary. And if I said get binary file, it comes out as binary. So this part is broken. If as binary, return file.read. Return codex dot. Did I copy something funky there? Yeah, boy, did I ever. I guess I needed it to be encoded anyhow. Let's copy this, shall we? Let's double check what we got here. Error loading, blip, 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 okay. And the thing we're actually trying to fix is get file internal. Yes, okay. So let's paste that to look at. File equals, okay, well, let's go ahead and just zump that out like so. That looks like it might be a thing. If as binary, return file.read. Return io.text io wrapper file encoding equals utf8 dot read. That might what did I break? Oh, right. Don't leave this in here. That's going to make it very unhappy. Oh, it's broken forever now. Crap on a cracker. Okay. That seems like it's okay. So, if I said I need to do this, and then I say get binary file main.sublime menu, it comes out as bytes. If I say get file, it comes out as a string. Okay, good. Whoops. And if I said readme.md, it comes out as text unless I say get binary file, in which case it comes out as binary. So that seems like it's probably doing what we want. So now the problem is our override reports are broken because when we say OS path exists, we don't test if there's an unpacked path in our new code. Okay. Might be the reason. We are looking at contains file. And we're looking at, oh, that's right. I could be looking at it right here. On line 807. This line is the unhappy one. How did that not fail before? Huh. If self.unpacked path, that. Okay. That seems to work a little better. Okay, now I think we're also going to need now the package report, which I would imagine should also still work. Now, we need to modify this as well. Remember, that's get file and get binary file. We want it to be get file here. Oh, I just mean the one thing we never tested is Get binary file. Nope.txt. Trying to load from local, trying to load from Sublime package. Okay, so, and if we did it this way, can't imagine how that would be any different, and it's not. Perfect. Now, we are going to find that thing I just did and do this. That can stay, that can stay, that has to go. That has to go. Reload this bad boy. Okay, so now if I did that again, it's just none. It's the content. We don't get to see all that stuff, if you will. Okay. Now, we look up to here. Right, so load metadata. That's the resource name. If it doesn't contain the file, return. We can say data equals this is in PackageInfo, right? Self.getFile res name. We don't need this resource at all here. That should do what we want for there. So get the resource name is either package data or package metadata. If that this package doesn't contain that file, leave. If it does contain that file, then get it. And we're going to assume that this doesn't return none because it contains that file. And self.metadata, that can still be a decode, so that part works. And up here, if not self-contains, this again would be data equals self.getFile dependencies.json instead of that, and resource is not needed. Reload that. That seems to work. Reload the override report. That worked. Reload this. That worked. If we came to package dev, unknown version. Oh, okay, so that's still broken because it should have been able to find stuff and it can't. We're not seeing any errors for that, right? No, we're just seeing a whole lot of that stuff. All right, so we're getting close. Print. Let's try that. Reload that. Now, if I come to the package report, there's no metadata in. Oh, I guess that doesn't really help, does it? Is package dev in this list? No. Okay. So that part probably worked. We'll leave that there. Metadata in %s. There. Just to be checky, just to be surezies. Metadata in package reloader, comment glory, because I did that origami pite of its own type. No metadata in, oh, that's right, because that's the local version. And if we look up here, there is metadata in package dev. So that part seems to be doing something. Terrible error while loading metadata. What do we think of that? I think we probably shouldn't have done that. There we go. Let's reload this first, and then let's reload this. Why is that mad now? Oh, I see, because I raised the exception. Self.getFile internal. Oh, for the same reason that I just broke the other damn thing. Dip. If self.unpacked path, then do this. So I imagine names only used. Oh, poop on a cracker. That part's just going to automatically bust, right? So unpacked path, all this. All righty. That's reloaded. Package report, reload. It seems to have not said terrible errors. So that means if we came to package dev, look, it has a version and dependencies and stuff. Now we disable package dev like so. And when we come back to, we need to reload that. If we hover over package dev, it's version 3.2.9 is currently disabled. We still get its metadata. Haha, success is ours. That was the point of this whole stream, and we actually managed to pull it off. Now, this code may need a bit more cleaning up. It says it returns a byte array, but it probably should return bytes. Get rid of that. And why did I do this in this particular order? Because, right, if it's in the package file, then we know we can definitely get it one way or the other. This is a little nicer, I think. We would have to say if self unpacked path and OS path exists, return true. Otherwise, try the other stuff if we wanted to check the unpacked path first. If we're checking to see if it contains a file, maybe this is easier than that. I don't know. But in any case, based on how we wrote this, what other changes that we could make is for get unpacked override contents. See, the tricky part about this is get file internal is just grabbing content the way Sublime would, but in some cases we do need to grab either unpacked or packed. So the other way to try to pull this off would be to try to make these things take the as binary and do the stuff that normally they would do, and then the other one could use those and cut stuff off. And I don't know that I necessarily like that per se. So I think I like this way better. And if we do that, then the metadata grabbing that we're doing is good. And if I said to do, we don't have to say this any longer. Yeah, I think. Oh, so we don't want to do this anymore. Whoops. We want to do that. Okay. I think there's a little bit more to do with that because, yeah, we don't need it to say that all the time, neither. Okay, so for load metadata, we can just do that. That's reloaded in the override report. It's nice and quiet. Over here, it's nice and quiet. And Unknown version. Nice. Okay, and that looks nice. I mean, except for how we don't really, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm liking these changes here. So I can go ahead and commit these, I think, and then continue on with that. Now, I think that was more or less all the information we wanted in here, except for the way that it's styled. Let's go ahead and find package dev and hover over it. I mean, yeah, the spacing of this is stupid and dumb. These fonts need to maybe change. The layout needs to perhaps change. Um, but that part's easier to do. I can work on the HTML for that. So I think we can go ahead and call this a win for this stream. We have successfully implemented what I wanted to implement and made this work even if packages are disabled. I better enable that before I do something silly later. Yeah, let us refresh that one. Whoop, does that not work? Oh, that's a report, excuse me. Freshen, I meant to pick. I don't know how to use my own package. There we go. These ones, you can't freshen these. You can only refresh that. Those require more work to be done. Okay, so that I think is probably cool. That's probably a feature to be added. So we can go ahead and delete that. Okay. This is looking good. So the next orders of business, and this is, I don't know if this will happen in the next stream, happening next week or not, but we want to finalize finally all of this stuff by double checking how we want it to be in here and verbiage put the reverse of this. If this is a dependency, instead of saying dependencies none, we would actually go and find all of the packages that have this information and this dependency information in them and pull all the packages that depend on this package. But that will be the topic for another live stream, perhaps, or we'll see what we do. If you have been watching, thank you so much. I think we actually got some stuff done here. Hopefully, I wasn't talking to myself without being or caught. Sometimes when I'm working on coding, I sort of get caught in a weird mode where I'm not really engaging and saying what I'm thinking and just pondering what's going on. Hopefully, I have not done that this time. And I think the next stream should go off at the appropriate time. I've got enough stuff backlogged for editing that the strange new unpredictable schedule of the gardeners and the people upstairs with the cast iron exercise balls won't get in the way of recording the next few videos in a way that it won't screw up the schedule like it did this time. That's all we have for right now. So if you have been watching this live, thank you so much for popping in live. Remember, you can always pop into the chat and ask questions about what I'm doing or just any old Sublime Text question, and if I have an answer for you, I will give you one. And if I don't have an answer, then we'll probably see me be embarrassed that I don't know the answer to your question. If you have any questions or comments on this, if you're watching the archive afterwards, you can leave those down in the comments section below, or you can hit me on Twitter at OdatNurd, and that includes if you have video suggestions for things you'd like to see me do in a live stream or things you'd like to see me do in videos on my other channel, which is linked down in the description of the video here as well, and things of that nature. But that is all we have for tonight. So from the land of OdatNurd and its 9,000 degree temperature, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.